Welcome to a Kelly Files special, A Question of Leadership. Over the last 2 weeks, we have witnessed a remarkable moment in the arc of the Obama presidency, as the president's former CIA director and defense secretary gives a series of interviews that raise serious questions about the president's foreign policy and his leadership. All this in the face of a major crisis in the Middle East. Democrat Leon Panetta, in a new autobiography, is suggesting the president, quote, has lost his way, and that he, quote, refuses to engage people, bringing the country to a point where we are governing by crisis, he says, not by leadership. The criticisms range from our decisions in Syria and whether we squandered an opportunity to arm Syrian rebels before they were infiltrated by al-Qaeda, to our approach in Iraq and whether we created the very vacuum now filled by the terror army known as ISIS when we withdrew all American troops in Iraq over the recommendations of our generals. Then there's Benghazi, where Secretary Panetta says the administration's much disputed talking points on exactly what happened that night were, quote, not on point. And to make his point, this respected leader who worked for 2 Democratic administrations has engaged in a nonstop series of eye-opening sit-downs. Here is a brief sample.
In retrospect now, was not arming the rebels at that time a mistake?
I think that would have helped. And I think in part we paid a price for not doing that in what we see happening with ISIS.
How big a threat should Americans view it as being?
I think it's a significant threat.
Now, President Obama has ruled out boots on the ground. Whether or not that turns out to be necessary, do you think it's unwise to rule out options at this point in a conflict like this?
I think, I always feel that presidents as commander-in-chief ought to keep all of your options on the table.
By not leaving U.S. troops in Iraq, President Obama committed a colossal blunder. Did he not?
There's no question that not maintaining a true presence in Iraq so that we could continue the momentum towards trying to secure that country and try to hope that it could govern itself in the right way, I think was a mistake.
And you looked him in the eye and
Absolutely.
You said, I, Leon Panetta, Secretary of Defense, and I'm assuming Mrs. Clinton did the same thing. I, Hillary Clinton, Secretary of State, and I'm assuming the CIA did the same thing.
Exactly.
All 3 of you looked Barack Obama in the eye, like I'm looking you in the eye right now, and said, you have to keep forces there. And he said, well, I don't.
Well, Bill, just to keep the record straight here, I think the president did support providing that $10,000 troop presence in Iraq, and supported CIA operations, supported the diplomatic operations that we wanted to continue. The real issue was how hard did he fight?
He didn't fight hard at all
to make it happen. That's the issue.
He didn't do
that I
anything.
raised.
Joining me now, General Richard Myers, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He is retired now. General, great to see you. Thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you, Megan.
And when Bill O'Reilly asked Leon Panetta whether he was worried right now about the state of the country, about our future plans in the Middle East, he said he is. He is worried. Should we all be worried about the leadership in the White House right now, in your opinion?
Well, first of all, I had a chance to work with Mr. Panetta for a brief few months, and he is, of course, one of our most thoughtful and wisest leaders on national security. So I think when he says things that we ought to listen. On the other hand, instead of, I think there's a real tendency now to pile on these comments and others, and what we have to do is kind of look forward and say, okay, what are we going to do going forward? We know we have this really bad threat that it's in its current manifestation is called ISIS, but it's the same extremist threat we've known about since before 9/11. So how are we going to deal with this in a meaningful way so we don't keep getting surprised by new mutations?
Okay, but here's what I'm asking, and this isn't to get you to be political, which you aren't, but when I listen to Leon Panetta, he sounds scared. He sounds scared about whether we have somebody in the White House right now who will do the things that are needed to keep us safe. And it seems like he's saying, this is why I wrote the book, because I'm trying to pressure him to act on what I, Leon Panetta, believe to be his courage, if only he will act on it. And do you have similar concerns?
I guess what I'm concerned about, and some of the words the president has said are actually fairly comforting when he talks about a comprehensive strategy and so forth. At the same time, you know, we're not as ambiguous about what we might do about these things. We kind of show all our cards at the beginning of the game. And in these sorts of situations where you have lots of options, ambiguity is your friend when you're trying to confront an adversary such as ISIS. So I guess what I would say, I think we need a lot more work to develop this comprehensive strategy. And I don't think we ought to rule things. As a military person, I mean, all those options ought to be at least on the table for a while. Some of them can be not high probability of ever happening, but we shouldn't tell our adversary that. We should proceed like this is a real danger to the United States of America and to our friends and allies, which it is.
The president has been criticized for ignoring his generals, or overruling his generals repeatedly, and he's done that time and time again. That's fact. But as somebody who was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, are people being too hard on him in this regard?
Well, fundamental to our democracy and our culture and our laws is the fact that we have civilian control of the military, and it's the military's role to provide their best military advice, to do that vigorously in private, and then the president gets to decide. But he's going to get diplomatic advice, he's going to get economic advice, all these things coming together. So I think that's been overhyped, the fact that in my conversations with folks that have replaced me back is that you know, the president does listen. But in the end, it's his call.
So now we're stuck with this, you know, for however we got here, we're stuck with this terror army that seems to be on the rise and that is not getting destroyed from what it appears by these airstrikes. First, let me ask you about the airstrike strategy, and then I want to ask you what you really think we need to do. Do you think the airstrikes are working?
Well, I think they're working, but I think in the end, you know, is it going to be airstrikes enough? And in fact, I would opine that it's not just airstrikes won't be enough, but military force won't be enough. There's going to have to be lots of other actions. For instance, in Baghdad, you have to have a good government in Baghdad. So we need diplomatic engagement with the new government in Baghdad to try to get them to provide the kind of leadership they need to provide inside that country. So, no, I don't think airstrikes are going to be sufficient. But in Iraq, you've got an Iraqi army that's been well trained, that's, if properly led, could help with this problem and maybe extinguish ISIS inside Iraq.
But they're not doing it. I mean, if properly led, who's going to go lead them? We've been trying. You know, they put down their arms and ran when ISIS came in.
Yeah, they did, and that was, of course, under that was the remnants of the Maliki regime there in Baghdad, where there was no incentive for those troops up in northern Iraq to follow somebody who was not trying to bring the country together. So that's what's needed. We need strong diplomacy, strong, I think, U.S. Help and consultation at the diplomatic level in Baghdad to get the government there to do the right thing. This isn't something that's going to turn around overnight, by the way. You made that point, Megan, I think just a minute ago. It's not going to turn around overnight. It's going to take considerable time. But that, I think, is the best hope in Iraq. Syria is a different matter.
Do you think now, I mean, we've been having this debate, but do you have a feeling on foreign policy, the best foreign policy to keep us safe? I mean, is it something that's more robust where America leads and is more interventionist, or is it something, you know, do we need to let the more Obama foreign policy of let's not be as interventionist, let's keep more to ourselves, let's show the world that we don't want to interfere in their business everywhere it may be happening? Does that need more time to play out, or do we have a pronouncement now on whether that'll keep us safe or will not?
Well, Megan, I think the world needs leadership in these kinds of situations, and if it's not the U.S., then where is that leadership coming from? And so the UN does a lot of wonderful things, but leadership in these kind of issues is not their strong suit. Syria would be the first example that I think of. It's not going to be NATO. NATO has got a lot of internal issues. They have budget problems. And anything that happens good in NATO is usually because of U.S. leadership or partnership with our allies there. So where is the leadership going to come from? And I think those countries that have the capability, the means, the intellectual thought processes and so forth, they ought to lead, and that's the United States. And we do it for our own national interest. We don't do it just to be good guys around the world, but we do it for our own national interest. And I think we have a vital national interest in helping exterminate this extremist movement that's been going on now for a long time. And again, the current mutation is ISIS.
General Richard Myers, thank you very much, sir. Former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Thanks, Megan.
All the best. Well, Mr. Panetta also says the problems with the presidency go way beyond his policies. There are also questions about courage and character. Up next, retired four-star General Jack Keane responds to that. Plus, new revelations from the former defense secretary are leading to new questions about what happened in Benghazi. We'll speak with one of the congressmen leading that investigation just ahead.
You, on the night of the attack, say you told President Obama you believed it was not a spontaneous attack, it was a terror attack. Is that correct?